Good evening. It is becoming a bit of a trend. Every night around this time, maybe a little bit earlier, Donald Trump makes a declaration from the White House. We often don't know what it will be about or what the implications will be, but it seems they're designed to make an impact, to show he is a president of action, a leader who's not afraid of angering even his closest allies. Tonight is no different. He's effectively declared a trade war with the rest of the world, promising to impose reciprocal tariffs on any country that charges taxes on US goods. And wait for it, that includes VAT. So if this plan goes ahead, it would mean British exports going to the United States will be subject to a 20% levy. We're hoping to have a listen. I think we can have a listen to what the president said in the White House a little earlier. We'll try and bring that to you in a moment. But first, let's cross to Mark Stone, who is in Washington, D.C. for us. Again, another, as you've described it, Mark, tsunami of announcements a little earlier this evening.
Yes, another day, and another day where we struggle to work out what the top line is, what the headline is. I mean, it could so easily be Ukraine, and we will go on to that in a moment in the programme, I'm sure. But first of all, it is clear today that Donald Trump has fired the first shots in what looks to be a pretty devastating trade war with the whole world. He is saying that in order to restore, as he puts it, a level playing field, he will put in place a reciprocal tariff system, which I think could set off a chain of events around the country. And he is specifically talking, for example, about VAT that is levied on goods that are sent from around the world, from countries that levy VAT into the United States. He says because of that, we will do the same back to you. So for the UK, for example, he sees in his eyes, although many economists would see it as a misunderstanding of what the VAT system is and how it works, and actually what money is levied or what taxes are levied. He sees VAT as a tariff, and he says he will tariff in reciprocity, which would mean for the UK 20% tariffs on everything that comes to the United States. And he repeated again and again in his very informal, impromptu, free-flowing news conference in the Oval Office that there would be no exceptions. Now, the difference between these tariffs, these set of tariffs that he is saying will go into place, and the tariffs that we saw in Mexico against Mexico and Canada, which lasted just a couple of days. Those tariffs, because they only lasted a couple of days, people are kind of thinking, we heard that the British government on Sophie Ridge's programme earlier on saying, well, you know, let's see what happens. Those tariffs only lasted a day or so, then they went away. The difference with those tariffs, Gillian, is that they were designed to make other countries do something for America, for Donald Trump, specifically to do with drugs and immigration. And when those countries appeared to say, OK, fine, we will do something, then he removed that tariff threat. This is somewhat different because this is an attempt to, as he would see it, level the playing field. If you put a tax of VAT on incoming goods, then we will do the same to you. And as I think you're going to discuss now, this is going to have a huge impact on countries around the world. I should say the reason we've got a guard of honour here is because Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, is about to arrive here at the White House. So, again, another country that will face huge problems if these tariffs come into place.
OK, let's cross to Paul Kelso now in our newsroom. Paul, how big a deal is this for the UK, and how likely is it that it would actually happen? I suppose you can't really answer the second question.
And I'm not sure how truly accurately I can answer the first one, because it's a question Pat McFadden, Mark referenced his interview with Sophie Ridge earlier. He couldn't answer it. They'll be asking themselves precisely that question at the Department of Trade. It is certainly going to put the UK more on the back foot than it thought it was. Like many other countries around the world, this is total trade war, as Mark was saying, that he's talking about launching here. But the UK, until now, thought it might be able to wriggle through the chaos of Donald Trump's emerging trade policy for a couple of reasons. One, outside the European Union. Many people in the government didn't want that to happen, but Brexit has left the UK outside a major trading bloc. And as a consequence of that, the UK's the UK doesn't have a trade deficit with the US, and that is what Donald Trump is addressing here. The US imports almost $1 trillion more in goods than it exports. And Donald Trump hates that deficit, despite the benefits it gives to American consumers in cheap goods. He hates it. He believes it's a tax. He believes it's ripping off the US. He wants to impose these tariffs to price out those imports, return manufacturing of chips and cars, as he said, to the US and equalise that situation. Now, the UK actually has a surplus, the US has a surplus, not a deficit with the UK. We export to them about £70 billion more than goes the other way. Just this morning, I spoke to Jonathan Reynolds, the Trade Secretary, about this issue. The tariffs this morning, the issue was around steel and aluminium, 25% tariffs levied early this week by Donald Trump. Jonathan Reynolds gave the impression he hoped to be able to get some kind of exemption to that because the aluminium goes into the US defence industry. It gives you an idea. The UK thought it might be in the clear here. We've got 20% to the cost of UK exports to the US. We're talking around £25 billion added to the trade deal. Of course, we have to see what actually happens, but this absolutely is a headache for UK exporters and for a government that's trying to work out a working relationship with the US under Donald Trump.
For the moment, thanks you. We're going to head back to Mark. And Mark, we're also hearing a shift in the president on what he's calling the peace talks with Russia. What has happened there?
Yes, I mean, as you say, it was a free-flowing news conference, and so it flipped from one subject to the other. Hard to keep up. So much was discussed. And on Ukraine, he was asked about the phone calls that he had yesterday. He spoke yesterday to Putin and then to Vladimir Zelensky, and he was asked about whether or not Ukraine would have a seat at the table. There had been some suggestion that his tone, at least, yesterday, and the tone of his defense secretary speaking in Europe, seemed to suggest that they were kind of leaning towards the Russians and that maybe the formation of whatever talks come would actually be in Russia's favour, and that Ukraine would kind of be a sort of bit player in the discussions. He suggested that wasn't the case. Have a listen.
Will Ukraine have a seat at that table for those negotiations?
Of course they would. I mean, they're part of it. We would have Ukraine, we would have Russia, and we'll have other people involved too. A lot of people, a lot of forks in this game. I'll tell you what, this is a very interesting situation, but the Ukraine war has to end. The young people are being killed at levels that nobody's seen since World War II, and it's a ridiculous war, and it has to end. We had a good talk with President Putin. I had a good talk with President Zelensky, very good talk.
Now, the other points that came out on Ukraine, I think, are very interesting. He said that he believes that Russia should be back in the G7. Of course, Russia was kicked out of what was then the G8 back in 2014 after its invasion of Crimea. The president here then was Obama. Donald Trump said he believes that was a mistake and that Russia should be brought back into the fold. I guess his view is that you bring them in closer and then you can negotiate with them better there. He said that he trusts Putin. I think Putin wants peace, he said. I believe him. I trust him on this subject. Well, it's clear that behind the scenes, many European leaders think that Donald Trump is mad to trust Vladimir Putin. But the problem that we've got, whether it would be the problem that European leaders have got, whether it would be on Ukraine or on tariffs, is that they don't want to be seen to criticize Donald Trump openly because he is so unpredictable, and the tariff threat seems to be always there and could get even greater. The final thought that I was just thinking about this earlier on, but it kind of links the whole thing together, is that Donald Trump is saying that NATO, European countries effectively, NATO needs to spend a lot more on defence, and that is why he is pushing them so hard on the Ukraine issue. You've got to spend more on defence, and yet at the same same time, he is imposing a tariff system that will cripple some European economies. It will certainly make them poorer, and therefore it's going to make them harder to be able to pay more into their defence budget. So an almighty headache for governments right around the world at the moment.
OK, Mark, thank you very much for the moment. Well, just to say, we are expecting Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India to join Donald Trump at the White House. They are expecting him to arrive any moment now, and we will bring that to you live as soon as it happens. Well, Donald Trump's comments about Ukraine tonight came as leaders met in Brussels. They gathered after a series of bombshells from Washington last night. That's where confirmed he would meet Vladimir Putin for peace talks without the Ukrainian president. Well, that left Volodymyr Zelensky scrambling for a seat at the table and insisting today that he would not accept a deal that was agreed without his involvement. And both Mr. Trump and his defence secretary made it clear they would no longer help protect Europe against Russian aggression. Instead, they angled for what's been described as an investment relationship between Washington and Kyiv, which could see rare earth traded for military aid. Our defence and security editor, Deborah Haynes, reports.
Arriving at NATO headquarters, the US Defence Secretary is the man everyone wants to talk to about Donald Trump's plan to end Russia's war in Ukraine.
Well, it's a great morning. The United States is proud to be here.
Secretary Hegseth, isn't your plan for Ukraine actually a betrayal of all the Ukrainian soldiers who gave their lives defending the whole of their country? And isn't it just a reward for dictators who use military strength to take what they want?
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing. And so that will require both sides recognizing things they don't want to.
Ukraine's president has spoken to Mr. Trump, but only after the US leader had a long chat with Vladimir Putin.
We cannot accept it as an independent country, any agreements without us. I articulate this very clearly to our partners. Any bilateral negotiations about Ukraine, not on other topics, but any bilateral talks about Ukraine without us, we will not accept.
Nervous times for everyone here, almost 3 years into Moscow's full-scale war.
I don't think that I really trust any deals that Trump would make, and I do feel that we are being left out of this situation, of this discussion, and I feel like we shouldn't be left out.
I don't trust anybody of our government, neither Trump, neither Putin. It's all brothers from one family.
Tensions too within this transatlantic family, despite the grins. Pete Hegseth wants allies to invest a lot more on defending themselves rather than relying on the United States.
We must make NATO great again. This administration believes in alliances, deeply believes in alliances. But make no mistake, President Trump will not allow anyone to turn Uncle Sam into Uncle Sucker.
No time to lose then, if Europe plans to heed this warning and harden its defences. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Brussels.
Well, Donald Trump suggested tonight that the Ukrainian president would be involved in peace talks and that there could even be discussions taking place in Munich tomorrow. But he seems to be sticking to his position that Ukraine may never look the same as it did before 2014. Well, this is how Ukraine looked back then. All of its territory intact before fighters loyal to Moscow began incursions. Russia then invaded Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula and annexed it, a move only recognised by Russia and a few other allied countries. And now, almost 3 years after the full-scale invasion, Russia controls about a fifth of Ukrainian territory. Well, Donald Trump has just insisted that he trusts Vladimir Putin and believes that he wants peace. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett sent this report.
On Russian state television, the tone was triumphant. An historic shift in relations was how this anchor described the phone call. Another told viewers to feel the difference. But officially, at least, Moscow's not celebrating yet. Russia's foreign minister even suggested the world has overreacted.
I was struck by the fact that the entire world has fallen into a kind of stupor. They were stunned when a normal, basic conversation between two well-mannered, polite people took place.
It's not that polite to invade your neighbour, but it seems Vladimir Putin will be rewarded, securing concessions on territory and NATO membership before peace talks have even begun. And then there's the prospect of another face-to-face meeting. Helsinki before, Saudi Arabia next, we're told, and then possibly Moscow. If Donald Trump does come to Moscow, it would be a very big win indeed for the Kremlin. Because ever since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, the West has sought to isolate Vladimir Putin and cast him as a pariah. But the image of him shaking hands with the American president here in the Russian capital would shatter that altogether. Plenty to chew over then at Moscow's California diner, where opinions are split on how many should be at the table.
Well, it doesn't depend on only two presidents. There should be at least three sides. The other side should also agree to this.
I'm for negotiations. I really like that at least bridges are being built for these negotiations. And I think that it is very useful for everyone.
Ukraine would beg to differ. Fast food and fast diplomacy is not to everyone's tastes. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Well, let's speak now to Sviatoslav Jurash, who's a serving Ukrainian MP and soldier, and he's in Kyiv tonight. Thank you very much for speaking to us. My first question to you is whether you believe we are at the beginning of the end, that peace is now in sight.
Sadly, we see one story coming out of the statements, another story in the battlefield. It's very clear that Russia is intent on pushing to gain as much territory as it possibly can grab. And again, the whole war began not because of the pretensions of Russia, this part of Ukraine, that part of Ukraine. It began with the very basic idea that for Russia, as it stands right now, Ukraine is not an independent nation or a state deserving of its own statehood. And Mr. Putin will keep on pushing. He certainly needs the respite because of all the losses he suffered. But the basic idea remains the same. And every Russian public comment is about that. The fact that they will not accept our independence and the right of Ukrainians to choose what their nation becomes.
Now, you're a politician and a soldier. What are you seeing on the battlefield, and when were you last in that position on the front line?
I was last in December, and the very clear image on the battlefield is that the Russians are pushing hard, and they aren't being successful as much as they would like to. We are keeping them out of most of Ukraine, and we are battling them for every inch of territory they're trying to grab. But the point is very much the same for us. In the end of whatever is attempted right now here, we want more than a piece of paper to defend us. We have given up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world for a piece of paper that meant nothing. Not just to the Russians who broke it, invading our country, taking over Crimea and chunks of the east, and then invading fully after 8 years of negotiations. It meant nothing to all the other guarantors of our independence. It's the fact of the matter that we need so much more to try and have a chance at an independent future. Because as we have shown time and time again, our nation is choosing an independent future. And our nation will fight for an independent future. From the politicians like myself to everyday individuals on the street, Ukrainians will put up a fight and will not accept their fate decided for them by whatever leaders from the world come together.
Are you encouraged by what you are hearing from President Donald Trump? He's now saying that President Zelensky will be included in any peace talks, this peace summit with Russia. But at the same time, he's also saying that he trusts President Putin and he believes that he wants peace.
I'm encouraged by the actions of President Trump. In the first presidency, there were plenty of very threatening ideas that were flying around during the campaign, especially in 2016. But then when he actually became president, he was the president who gave Ukraine weapons. He gave us those weapons, which we put to very good use in terms of defending Ukraine after full-scale invasion in 2022, as well as granting with that permission to other NATO allies to provide different means of support, again, that we put to great use in terms of destroying the Russian war machine that was trying to overtake our nation.
But are you, sorry to cut in because we are running out of time, but are you worried that Donald Trump is an ally of President Putin when he says that he trusts him, he believes him?
Trump is known for saying many things, but I look at his actions and the fact that he gave us weapons, that he provided the green light for the NATO allies to provide those weapons that have proven a fundamental role in defense of Ukraine at every single step is something that speaks to me much more than any of the words that are out there.
OK. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Sviatoslav Jurash. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're watching The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Still to come, the latest live from Munich, where a car was driven into crowds today, just over a week before national elections.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them.
A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again. This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under. Sky News, the full story first. It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering, designed to humour and to help us.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive. Welcome back. Let's focus now on the suspected car ramming attack in southern Germany that's brought the issues of security and immigration into sharp focus. This morning in Munich, as striking workers held a protest, witnesses say a white Mini accelerated and ploughed into the crowd. At least 28 people were injured, 2 of them seriously. The suspect, who was arrested at the scene, is a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker. The incident is being investigated by anti-terror police and comes just over a week before national elections. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports.
This is the moment police arrest a suspected attacker, a man accused of driving a car into people in Munich. As police hold him, a few metres away, the innocents caught up in this carnage. Some trade union demonstrators still dressed in their neon vests. Prams, shoes, glasses and umbrellas, all left behind in the rush to escape. Protesting union members had only seconds to act as a Mini tore through the crowd. Dozens were injured, including children.
We saw the whole demonstration. They were walking along the whole street, and when they crossed the intersection, a car drove into the back of the crowd. I heard 1 or maybe 2 shots right after the car went into the crowd. I think that was the police.
There was already a heavy police presence in the city ahead of the annual Munich Security Conference this weekend. As ambulances lined up to ferry away the hurt, helicopters hovered overhead.
A vehicle approached from behind, caught up with the police vehicle, started to overtake, accelerated, and then drove into the end of the demonstration. Colleagues caught the perpetrator. The vehicle was shot at once. The perpetrator was arrested. The suspect is a 24-year-old Afghan, and he is an asylum seeker.
Images posted on social media show the suspect Farad N, whose face can't be shown for legal reasons, next to a white Mini Cooper. The Interior Minister has been here to offer her condolences, but the fact that the suspect is an asylum seeker only adds to the shockwaves from this incident. In just over a week, Germans will vote in an election which is already dominated by debates around migration, after a spate of attacks carried out by foreigners. Last month, another Afghan man was arrested for a knife attack in Aschaffenburg that left a man and child dead. The far-right Alternative for Germany party have repeatedly called for tougher migration rules and are currently second in the polls. Their leader Alice Weidel today tweeting, "My deepest sympathy goes out to the victims and their families. Is it going to continue like this forever? Migration change now." And keen to show violence wouldn't be tolerated, the current Chancellor was also quick to comment.
What happened in Munich today is terrible, a terrible attack. Even if not everything is known yet, what we will know at some point is already clear. An Afghan perpetrator has seriously injured people here, and that is something we can neither tolerate nor accept. This perpetrator cannot count on any leniency. He must be punished, and he must leave the country.
Munich is now on the edge. The pain triggered by this seemingly senseless act, only widening divisions in this already divided country.
Well, let's get another picture now of how events played out by looking at the map. As we heard, the attack happened as trade union demonstrators gathered at 2 locations either side of the central railway station. They planned to head towards a meeting point at the top of Brenner Street before holding a rally at Königsplatz. But as they made their way there, the car ploughed into the back of the protesters on Seedstraat. Well, that's where Siobhan Robbins is tonight. And Siobhan, tomorrow, just a mile from where the attack happened, the Ukrainian president and the US vice president are attending the Munich Security Conference.
Yes, that's exactly right. I'm at the place where that suspected attack happened. And if you have a look now, you can see actually here, really sad scene, two of the Verdi flags that would have been held by some of the members who had gathered here, the union members, as part of the demonstration, have been left here with some roses, and there are makeshift vigils along this street. As you say, this is around a mile, a kilometre and a half from where the Munich Security Conference will begin properly tomorrow. And police have said that actually what happened was they alleged that this driver drove up and saw the police who were going alongside this demonstration and actually went round the police convoy and then ploughed in to the back of that crowd. But a really horrendous and painful situation playing out here in Munich.
The issue of immigration already dominating the election.
That's right. This election was called last year, actually, mainly based on the economy, but very quickly those debates have been dominated by migration. And that's because there have been now a number of attacks where the suspect is a foreigner. So just before Christmas, a Saudi doctor is accused of driving a car into a crowd at a Christmas market, killing 6 people and injuring hundreds. Then a couple of weeks ago, as I said in my report, 2 people were killed by an Afghan man in Aschaffenburg, which is in the south of Germany. And then this attack happening today as well, all of it bringing migration back into the headlines, and particularly because this election is the first time since World War II that a far-right party is currently polling second. That's the Alternative for Germany party, and they have, as you know, consistently put migration and the call for stronger controls around migration at the middle of what they stand for. Now, we've seen other parties like the Christian Democrats, which is the party of the former Chancellor Angela Merkel, really try and pull some of the support back by also calling for much stricter controls over migration. But this attack now, going just over a week into this election, really underlines, as I said in the report, the divisions that have already begun opening up in this country.
OK, Siobhan, thank you very much for the moment. We just want to bring you the latest pictures now of the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, arriving at the White House. We just get a brief glimpse of him there as he arrives for talks with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, very much a fan of Narendra Modi, has never openly criticised him, although he has criticised India, and high on the agenda, one would imagine, will be tariffs and trade with India. So those are the latest pictures of his arrival at the White House. This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Next up, Shell is battling claims of oil pollution in Nigeria. I'll speak to one of the community leaders who brought the energy giant to the High Court.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Welcome back. In post-war Syria, the focus for most people is on trying to move forward, even in the midst of ruins. But there are also rebels turned soldiers whose job is to hunt down the leaders of a fallen regime that brought so much destruction and suffering. At the top of the most wanted list is former President Bashar al-Assad, who's out of reach in Russia. There's also his brother, Maher, accused of killings and torture in a network of detention centres. Ali Mamlouk, known as Bashar al-Assad's shadow advisor, was a key figure in the regime's intelligence network. And Jamil Hassan, a former Air Force chief, is wanted for the torture and murder of civilians who were locked up in prisons. Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has this report.
It's still hard to believe how much of Damascus and its suburbs were pounded to dust by the Assad regime and his Russian military supporters. His own people killed or made homeless in a remorseless campaign of bombing. Its people are trying to move on, but many remain in the midst of the ruins. Rebuilding remains a distant hope. The various militias that supported HTS, the group that led the takeover of Syria, are now in the matching black uniforms of the newly created General Security Unit. They are always present, but by the standards of other revolutions, they are keeping quite a low profile. We drove to meet the youthful head of security in Damascus. He is Abdul Rahman Dabag, a cousin of the country's new president. Overlooking the city, he explained, to move forward, Syria must also hunt down the senior leaders of the Assad regime who terrorized the entire population.
Syrians have every right to see justice served for those who caused them harm during the reign of this now defunct regime. By nature, every human finds comfort in witnessing accountability, justice, and the rightful reclaiming of what was taken.
In the oldest capital city in the world and its ancient souk, dating back 5,000 years, things do look fairly normal. The trading and shopping in this bustling covered market goes on. But barely a family here was untouched by the regime and its relentless program of detentions and torture in jails across the country. Baria was locked up for 100 days, accused of feeding anti-Assad demonstrators. Inside her jail, she says, torture was the norm. Could you hear torturing taking place a lot of the time of other prisoners?
Yes, the cries of the men, so many, over and over again, too much. It would begin as soon as the sun went down. The torture was endless. My husband wasn't spared. I recognized his cries. They tormented him. One of the inmates called out to him, shouting that his family was here. The warders heard her, came straight for him. They dragged him away and beat him in the corridor. They tortured him relentlessly, with no regard for his age. He was born in 1955. I take my grievance to God.
7 of her relatives died in jail. Amongst them, her husband, one of her sons, and her 2 brothers. The memories still haunt her. This ancient country's recent history is still raw. From the detention cells, untouched since its inmates were freed in December, to the military hospital morgues and operating rooms that saw demonstrators tortured and murdered in places built to save lives, not extinguish them. The legacy of the Assad tyranny is pain and death. It will never be forgotten. It will never be washed away. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Syria.
It posted $10 billion in profits last year, and now the oil giant Shell is in the High Court in London, accused of being responsible for oil pollution in Nigeria that's left entire communities without clean water and ruined farming and fishing. Nigeria is one of the leading producers of oil in Africa, but many have criticised the companies who extract it. Lawyers claim hundreds of leaks and spills from Shell's pipelines and infrastructure have devastated the environment around the Niger Delta. In the southern reaches of the country, they're representing two groups in particular, the Bile and the Ogale communities, a combined population of 80,000 people who say their lives have been massively affected by the pollution for more than a decade. Well, Shell argues that the vast majority of the pollution came from criminals sabotaging pipelines, stealing oil and illegally refining it. But lawyers for the communities say Shell has overstated the impact of sabotage and blames it for the damage caused. Well, with me tonight is King Okpabi, the leader of Nigeria's Bile community. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. First of all, can you tell me what your community's experience has been of what you're saying the pollution that Shell has caused to the area?
It has been quite devastating. You know, in the 50s when Shell came to Ogale was a beautiful community with wonderful environment, wonderful soil, and we received them with great hospitality. We loved them. Even though we never knew what they were doing was gradually poisoning our land. And so what we have now is a complete destroyed eco and aqua system of the people of Ogale. We have strange diseases. Our water, this is the water we drink, highly polluted. The United Nations studies that they did in 2011 said that the benzene in our water is 900% times over the United World Health Organization approved level for drinking. So that's the situation that we have in Ogala. People are dying as we're speaking. Strange diseases, skin diseases, people have cancer, people are dying every day in Ogale. So that's the situation.
And this is the water that
yes.
people have to use, that
yes.
drink, they use to
they
cook,
drink,
they bathe in?
Yes. You either drink this or you buy. You buy water. So those who can afford, buy water in Ogale. It's tragedy. And instead of Shell sitting down with us to discuss how we can have some sort of succor and remedy to what is going on, they are taking us through expensive court technicalities, you know. So people are dying as we speak. I had to bring this water to tell the world the story. It's terrible.
And this water, as well as being polluted, you can see that it's not very clear, but it also smells of petrol.
Oh, yes. It's highly polluted. But what do you do? Even us, the leaders, we have signposts placed on all the water spots in my community. But if you can't give me water, if you can't buy clean water for me, if you can't provide clean water, and this is what I have, should I die of hunger? So people are taking it. People are cooking with it. They are washing their clothes with it. They are bathing with it. People are dying every day in my community.
So how significant is it then for you that this case has now begun today in the High Court? This is the pre-trial stage.
Yes.
How significant is it?
Oh, we are very happy. It's a mixed feeling. I'm happy that now the re-case will start because Shell has come up with a lot of shenanigans, of technicalities, taking us from we've gone to the Supreme Court on one technicality. We went up to the Court of Appeal, and now they got the definite order that the trial must go on. Now, I think what they're talking about now is the issue that whether do we have a fundamental right to life and to clean environment. And if we do, that they shouldn't be held liable because they are a company. So we should, so it's those shenanigans. That's what we have been going through.
So the basis of the argument is whether you have a right to fundamental human rights, whether that's part of your fundamental human rights to have a clean environment.
Yes, they say we don't have. And even if we do, they cannot be held liable. It's someone else.
They are saying it's not their responsibility, and a lot of the pollution is caused by sabotage, by people tapping into pipelines and extracting oil illegally, for which they say they're not responsible.
That's not correct. That's not correct. Even on the 2nd of this month, before I left my village, there was a spill caused by their equipment, absolute equipment. Right in Ogali, huge spill. Is that bunkery? Is that sabotage? No. They came to the palace and they accepted responsibility for that. And that's what goes on. But even if there are things like that which are not in Ogali, you are supposed to be an expert. Those mineral resources were beneath the earth. You said you have the expertise to operate and you brought it up. You should be able to protect it from people's going into it to make it to kill people. So they are responsible to protect their pipelines.
What do you finally want to see happen, as well as them accepting responsibility and, I guess, liability? Yes. Are you expecting compensation?
Of course. I think they can never, I've always said this, they can never get us back to where we were. But give us some sort of, come and clean the land, do remediation of the soil, give us clean water, try to see how you can give us a livelihood. Our livelihood has been destroyed. And then, of course, pay us compensation. That's what we're asking them to do. And I don't think that's too much.
King Opabe, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Coming in to speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you for telling our story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now to an asteroid thought to be about the size of Big Ben that'll buzz past Earth in 2032. While NASA says there's an extremely low chance that it will hit our planet, the probability has been nudging up since the space rock was first spotted weeks ago. It might even hit the moon. Or should we be worried? Our science correspondent, Thomas Moore, explains.
Is the Earth really on a collision course with a huge asteroid? This is NASA's best guess on what asteroid 2024 YR4 looks like. It's estimated to be between 40 and 90 meters across, around the size of an apartment block, and yes, it actually could hit Earth. Right now, 2024 YR4 is heading away from the Earth. By the end of April, it will be too far away for even the most powerful telescopes to see as it loops further out into the solar system. But it comes back into view in 2028, and then there's just 4 years before its path could cross the Earth's orbit. The latest calculations suggest that on the 22nd of December 2032, there is a 1 in 45 chance of an impact, causing severe damage across a wide area. Obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but as we gather more information on the asteroid, the chances of it hitting us might fall. If there is even a small chance of it hitting Earth, NASA would almost certainly launch a mission to try and nudge it off course. It's already done that as a test, smashing a spacecraft into the larger asteroid Dimorphos. The question is, would that be enough this time, or might a nuclear device be needed? That sounds extreme, and it's also the plot of the 90s film Armageddon. But nothing will be off the table if a mission is needed to avert disaster.
Well, Davide Fanocchia is a navigation engineer at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and is tracking the asteroid. Good evening to you. So when exactly was it first sighted?
Well, this object was discovered last December. The exact date is December 27th, and it was in the Earth neighborhood, and the Atlas telescope, which is a NASA-funded search program for asteroids, first spotted it.
What are the chances of a collision? I know the projected date is some way off, but give us an idea exactly whether it could actually collide with Earth.
Well, for most objects, once we discover them, we can immediately rule out any possible impact with the Earth. In this case, that was not yet possible. We have a small 2% probability of impact for 2032. But to look at things from another perspective, there is about 98% chance that the object will miss, and that's the most likely outcome.
And we hope. And what sort of size are we talking about? And put that into some perspective for us.
Yeah, so I think we have a range based on the brightness of this object. The size can be estimated to be somewhere between 40 and 90 meters. So it's a fairly small asteroid compared to larger ones that are out there.
So not too big an impact potentially that it could make. But what sort of damage could an asteroid of that size cause?
Well, so we don't know exactly the size, as I was mentioning, and the impact damage would depend on that size. But a good point of reference is the Tunguska impact that happened in 1908. That was an impact above Siberia, and that flattened about 2,000 square kilometers of trees. So that's a kind of a good comparison for this one, in the very unlikely case this object were to hit.
And when will you be absolutely certain that there will not be an impact, or indeed if there possibly could be? I know you said there's a 2% chance, but when will that be a more definite prediction?
Well, right now the goal is to track this object. We have time until April to collect additional data, and the most likely outcome is that we will be able to rule out that possibility by the time this observation window closes. If that is not conclusive, then we will be able to know in 2028 with much more certainty when it comes back into sight and we can get additional observations.
OK, you don't look like a worried man tonight.
No.
OK, thank you very much for showing your expertise with us, Davide Finocchia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll finish tonight with more of what Donald Trump had to say from the White House earlier as he rolled out his plan to increase US tariffs to match the tax rates that other countries charge on imports. It risks triggering a broader economic confrontation with allies and rivals alike, as he hopes to eliminate what he calls trade imbalances.
I have decided, for purposes of fairness, that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them, no more, no less. In other words, they charge us a tax or tariff, and we charge them the exact same tax or tariff. Very simple. You know, you hear about a VAT tax all the time, the VAT system, which is far more punitive, actually, than a tariff. Similar, but more punitive. To be similar so that the way we're going to look at it, we're going to call it a tariff, because they use that as a way of getting away from the tariff and the designation of tariff, but it's essentially similar or the same thing. So a VAT tax will be viewed as a tariff. Certain areas of Europe do it, to put it mildly. They have about a 20% VAT tax. Sending merchandise, product, or anything by any other name through another country for purposes of unfairly harming America will not be accepted.
Well, it's been a roller coaster of a week with developments every single night from Washington, D.C. The Gaza ceasefire, on Ukraine, on tariffs. We'll continue to cover all of the developments in Donald Trump's first days in office. That's it for The World for tonight. Yalda is back on Monday. Stay with me now for the news at 10.